plans. Today we're going to look at a course of action through a company called PhilanthroCorp. And PhilanthroCorp is an auxiliary, and you'll hear more about this, but from the Kentucky, is a recommendation from the Kentucky Baptist Foundation. I'm very humbled to be a part of Kentucky Baptist and a part of the Kentucky Baptist Foundation. In fact, I've accepted a position to serve on the board of the Kentucky Baptist Foundation. And we had Dr. Harmon come and share more from a pastoral point of view of what it means to get your affairs and plans of estate planning in order. Well, in thinking about that, I won't say I've always, but since I've been in ministry, which is 19 years this upcoming week, I've preached my first sermon 19 years ago. And from shortly thereafter, I have firmly gotten a grasp on being a financial planner and planning on what you have. It's really not yours, it's really what is God's. And it certainly goes beyond the 10%. It's 100% God's. Everything we have is God's. And how do we distribute that and what we do with it? Well, in helping you understand about what chapter in life you're in now and chapters in life for the future, I'm thankful that we have Brother Ron Beck, who is going to be here to help us look at some very practical ways, get you thinking, looking at your estate planning and your personal experiences, and not, the church can definitely be a part of your life, but we care about your home, we care about your family, and we want to make sure that we care about people. And this is something personal, private. You'll hear all about that here in just a moment. But let me introduce our speaker to you this morning so you can have a relation with him. I've personally got to know Ron, numerous phone conversations. We've been out to lunch. I've introduced him to Tommy, our Director of Missions. Tommy has recently had him at our latest Lake Cumberland Baptist meeting, which was actually just right down the road just a week or so ago. And he has come and joining us from actually out in Bowling Green. He's been a native of Louisville, but he is a resident of Bowling Green and has been so over the past 50 years. He's been out in the western part of Kentucky. In fact, his education at Western Kentucky University and the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He is retired from the Western Kentucky University. Now, his work ethic was he worked in student affairs, alumni affairs, and department. And his last position at the Western Kentucky University was the director of planned giving. Married to his wife, Bonnie, of 54 years, and some of the investments that he has made is his 2 children and his 7 grandchildren. He's worked in the area of estate planning now for over 14 years. He's been also, catch this, a Baptist layman for 50 years at Eastwood Baptist Church in Bowling Green, Kentucky. There he's also served as a deacon and other leadership positions. He's been a teacher of adult men for over 30 years. And as you have your cards and information, he will instruct you how to fill out those. You fill out the top portion, but he'll help you with the rest of that. And I'm very humbled. And guys, I think that we really need to be mindful of the blessed opportunity we have that Brother Ron Beck has come to join us today. And I assure you that you may say, what does this have to do with worshiping the Lord? Everything. It is discipleship training, it is planning, and you will hear all about it. And I thank you in advance for being in tune and hearing my friend, Ron Beck. So would y'all just give him a great big round of applause and welcome him to Ron Beck.
I just asked Jason what time he wants me to finish. And he said, when you're done.
When you're done. When God's done. How's that? When God's done. There you go. Ready to go.
Do you realize what you've just done for me? Hey, I've enjoyed being here with you this morning. I've enjoyed being in this community a couple of times now. In fact, I drove all over this section of Pulaski County trying to find Oak Grove Baptist Church about 2 weeks ago. And lo and behold, I thought Oklahoma Baptist Church was in Nancy, Kentucky, which is up here somewhere. And so I just drove all the way through 80 till I got to Fishing Creek, and I figured I was out of Nancy by that time looking for Oklahoma Baptist Church because I knew I was going to be here soon. I've never seen more churches on more intersections of roads than I've seen in Pulaski County. French tells me there are 233. I think that's the right number. It could be different than that. But it is good to be with you. It's good to be a friend of Jason's. I respect him and respect your church. I've enjoyed being with you today. I want to share some thoughts with you, and then we're going to go through a little slide program, and we're going to try to be finished here very soon. Principles of estate planning from a biblical worldview have not been adequately addressed by the church. Both spiritual and practical issues that we face. I've taught men's Bible study for well over 30 years, and I've never taught a lesson on biblical stewardship of the estate. I've been a member of a Baptist church since I was 11 years old. That's a long time. I've never heard a sermon on stewardship of the estate. The church has been dedicated to teaching you and future generations how to receive eternal life and how to live with God throughout eternity, and also to live as a disciple of His during this life. You've had pastors, you've had deacons, you've had teachers like we've had up here, you've had other leaders who have led you through this process. And once you step off into heaven, you will spend eternity with God and fellow believers throughout the remainder of history. Your estate plan can and should be a blessing to your family and a blessing to the Lord through His church. Most estate plans, even among believers, have been done, unfortunately, from a secular world view. Estate planning can be and should be the greatest spiritual journey, one of the greatest spiritual journeys that you undertake. We want to help you to seek the face of God, who owns everything, through this process. This should not begin in an attorney's office, but should begin on our knees in front of the Lord, seeking His will and His direction. So my question is, what is God leading you to do through your will, through any trust that you may need, whether they be special needs trust or children's or grandchildren's trust, spousal trust, other kinds of things. But what is He doing in terms of leading you, younger families, through guardianship issues related to your children? And what might He be leading you to do to even discuss some things like your retirement plan assets and the future tax that your beneficiaries are going to face as you look at your partner in your retirement plan, especially those plans that were funded with pre-tax dollars, which most of your IRAs have been funded with pre-tax dollars. So what is He leading you to do in relation to your partner in your retirement plan? And that partner happens to be Uncle Sam, happens to be the federal government. So we're going to talk about a few of these things as we go through this little discussion. So we sang "I'll Fly Away." So are you ready to sing "I'll Fly Away" today? Now, if I ask you that question, most of you will answer it from the standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint. And you'll say, yes, I know the Lord. I have been saved. I will spend eternity in heaven with Him. Although you probably don't want to really sing I'll Fly Away today. And maybe not even tomorrow. Oh yes, I'm ready to sing I'll Fly Away some glad morning when this life is over. I want to suggest to you that there are at least two other questions that you need to answer if you're really ready to sing I'll Fly Away. And one of the, I've obviously already talked to you about the spiritual. I would suggest that some of you may have some issues related to relationships, and before you really sing I'll Fly Away, you might need to address those issues. Whether it be in family, whether it be here in the church, whether it be at work, whether it be through your community, there may be some of those questions that you need to address. And I would suggest that there's a third area that you need to address before you really sing I'll Fly Away. And it has to do with your personal affairs. It has to do with your financial affairs. So we're going to talk about this morning. By the way, here's an example of a guy getting ready to sing I'll Fly Away. An elderly gentleman, quite well to do, was in the hospital, very ill, calls three of his closest friends together, his preacher, his lawyer, and his doctor, and he says, you know, I've heard you can't take it with you, but on the offhand chance that you may be able to. And he pulls out three envelopes. Each of them has $100,000 in it. He said, as a personal favor to me, would you just take this envelope and just before they close the lid on the casket, would you slip that $100,000 in? So the three guys took the envelopes. A few weeks later, they were standing by the graveside at the interment. The preacher spoke up first. He said, I've got a confession to make. I want you to know that we've got a real homeless problem in our community. And I took that $100,000 and we used it to help those homeless people. So the doctor spoke up second and he said, you know, we really need a new CT machine down at the hospital, and I took that $100,000 and I put it in that fund. So the lawyer rather indignantly stepped up and he said, I can't believe you didn't honor the final wishes of our dearly departed friend. I want you to know that I wrote a personal check for $100,000 and put it into that casket. Now some of you will get that. It may take you a little while to understand. And I am going to make an application of that as we get through the rest of this discussion. So what is a steward? What is stewardship? Here's a good definition. We are called as God's stewards to manage that which belongs to God. While God graciously entrusted us with His care, the development and enjoyment of everything He owns, as His stewards, we are responsible to manage His belongings well and according to His desires and purposes. Now, I just said a mouthful. And I want you to be thinking about this term manager or steward as we go through some of the other slides here in this presentation. So what is an estate design? This is a design that fits your needs and your circumstances. It's the process of arranging your personal affairs for the management of those affairs if and when you become incapacitated, and at your death, the distribution of those assets. And all of those plans have to be in accordance, obviously, well, they should be in accordance with your wishes, and according to federal and state law. By the way, if you don't have an estate plan, and there is somebody sitting in here as an adult today who doesn't have an estate plan. Most of you don't have an updated estate plan. 75% of the people in this country do not have an updated estate plan. 50% don't have a plan, and another 25% don't have a current plan. So we want to help you address that planning, and we want to also look at the fact that every one of us has got an estate, whether it's just an old tennis racket, and I put that 67 Chevy in there. Actually, if you had a 67 Chevy, you need to lock that in a barn somewhere or in your garage, because that may be the most valuable thing that you got. But you've got a home, you've got other property, you've got proceeds from life insurance, and you've got retirement plan assets. And PhilanthroCorp, which is a faith-based organization that is located in Colorado Springs, Colorado, has partnered for several years now with the Kentucky Baptist Foundation to provide a ministry to you that I'm going to describe as we go through the next few points. I like the old gospel song. This would be the second one that we would have sung if I had thought of it in time, is "This world is not my home. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore." There are at least two spiritual principles that come out of the first verse of that song. The first one is that earth is our temporary home. Now, I admit to you that to the extent that I understand that, it is the ministry of the Holy Spirit that has given me that understanding. Earth is our temporary home. Remember we were singing "I'll Fly Away" a few minutes ago. So we're going to get on the wings of an angel, and we're going to fly away. Earth is our temporary home. The second point from that verse is that our treasures are stored up in heaven, or laid up in heaven. And I don't believe that $100,000 in that envelope is what they're talking about when they say our treasures are laid up in heaven. Nor do I believe that you're going to need one or more envelopes with $100,000 in it when you get to heaven. So a lot of the language that we use, even some of it that comes from scriptures about streets that are paved with gold, those are words and language that really kind of gets us just a glimpse of what true heaven is going to be like. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Here's our premise. Estate planning is the single largest act of stewardship that most of us as Christians will ever perform. Now, I believe that is a true statement by definition, but as I said to you earlier, it hasn't been taught, it hasn't been preached, it hasn't been written about, and so the single largest act of stewardship that we'll ever perform as a Christian needs to be addressed. So I teach these 70, 80, 90-year-old guys at Eastwood, and by the way, that's a pretty rough crowd in most Baptist churches, and some of you, certainly some of you ladies understand that. Even some of you guys will admit that you're pretty rough and pretty hard-headed at times. But I ask this question: does God own everything? And then I put up my hand and I say this. Now, before you answer that question, understand that there are implications as to how you answer the question. And I'm not looking for the politically correct answer. I go to my guys and I say, does God own everything? Oh yes, He owns it all. Understand, there are some implications. So what are the implications? Well, if He owns it, what are you? You're a steward. So what's a synonym for steward? A manager. So you're managing His stuff from a biblical worldview. Now, we're not talking about a secular worldview. From a biblical worldview, you're managing His stuff for a season. And at some point, you're going to have to make a management transfer decision. And I believe, we believe, that that is a spiritual decision-making process before you ever get around to addressing tax and legal issues. Who's going to get this piece? Who's going to get that piece? Father, what would you have me do with that which you have created? What we want to do then is to help you design your estate in such a way that you've adequately addressed family, frankly in this order: family, kingdom impact, I thought I got that typo out of there, Jason, but I obviously didn't. Impact, E-I-M-P-A-C-T. There's not that little squiggle mark in there, so I need to fix that. Your own personal legacy, and yes, we will get around to addressing tax and legal issues, but that's going to come at the end of the process. Another term that I'd like for you to think about is your legacy. A legacy is something that you leave behind. What do you want to be remembered for? What have you already established as your legacy with your family, with your children, with your spiritual family, of which we are among each other right now, among our body of believers? We believe that an estate plan, if it's the single largest act of stewardship, then it is a significant statement of your faith and of your values. Psalm 78 suggests a worthy goal for our legacy. We will tell the next generation the glorious deeds of the Lord, about His power and His mighty wonders. Any of you guys know Dan Garland? Some of you guys have been around here long. Dan's from here in Pulaski County. Dan is our interim pastor at Eastwood right now. And he just did a Mother's Day sermon, and he just talked about this legacy, and he talked about the purpose of the church. And the purpose of the church is to tell future generations about the wonders of the Lord, which we've already been talking about. That's what you were doing when you did that lesson this morning to these children. You were teaching them about this whole process. So what we want to do is to help you address your will, your revocable living trust, or other trusts that you might need, your DPA, which means durable power of attorney, your health care directives, your beneficiary designations, even your PODs, payment on death. And when we finish this process, which is a series of conversations that we have on the telephone with you with our estate specialists out in Colorado Springs, what we'll do is to provide you with a binder with all those documents for the surviving spouse and or the children that will be involved in addressing your estate. So let's take about 5, 6, 7 minutes and let's talk about some areas where we might be able to help you. You have assets that would generate unnecessary income taxes at death, such as 401k plans, traditional IRAs, and other tax-qualified funds. Quick story. My mom and dad were modest means. Dad worked as a draftsman at General Electric in Louisville. Mom worked in a department store after us 3 kids were up and out of college. They accumulated $300,000 in their retirement plans, which is pretty good for them. When Dad died, his share went to Mom. When Mom died, that asset passed down to us 3 kids. And I got a big check from the mutual fund company for $100,000. And I got a bill from Uncle Sam for $30,000. They call that income with respect of the deceased. It's the IRD tax. There's only one way to avoid the IRD tax, and that's through charitable giving. We can show you some ways that your children can benefit from that asset and your church can benefit from it, and we'll disinherit Uncle Sam in the process. So the IRD tax, that's a big deal, and it's one that most of you need to be addressing because you funded your retirement plan assets with pre-tax dollars. Even some of you younger folks have not taken advantage of the Roth IRA and gone ahead and paid the taxes so that you could make the contribution and it would grow tax-free and the distributions would be tax-free. So you're sitting there with that IRD tax just ready to happen. By the way, they call that the government's retirement plan. That's what they're waiting for you guys to die, and then they'll take their big chunk out of that. You have sufficient assets to live on, and you want to be sure to do the wisest tax planning to avoid unnecessary estate taxes at death. Does anybody in here know what the federal estate tax exemption is right now today? If you did, you either are in this category or you're a CPA or maybe you're a lawyer. $11.8 million. The exemption for one person. So with proper planning, you and your spouse can shelter over $23 million from federal estate tax. Jason, how many $23 million families are there in this room today? Not many, if any. So you don't have most of you don't have a federal estate tax issue. But that R&D tax is still sitting out there waiting for you. Next one, you would like to learn more about biblical principles that could guide you in planning the distribution of your estate. We'd be happy to provide that information to you. You anticipate, we might be able to help you if you anticipate a taxable financial transaction in the future, such as a sale or transfer of a business or other highly appreciated assets. So there may be some business owners in the room. There are also some real estate owners here in the room. And some of you guys are sitting on some very highly appreciated assets. That's those farms you're sitting on. And our President Joe Biden wants to reduce the federal estate tax exemption to $1 million and wants you not to get the stepped up basis in those, but to pay all of that capital gains tax that was on those. Just need to be aware of that. But if you're involved in some of that, then there are some ways that we can creatively work with you to help you address that. You realize that you could leave a significant inheritance to your children and perhaps grandchildren, and would appreciate creative input as to how this can be done to help them rather than hurt them. Did you know the average inheritance in this country is spent in 12 to 18 months? Mom and Dad have worked their whole life to accumulate. They've taken risks. They've sacrificed. The kids are spending it in 12 to 18 months. It raises kind of a question, really. Another question that many people ask is, should I teach? Should I treat all of my children the same in the estate plan? Maybe. Maybe not. Here's the scenario. You got 3 kids. 2 of them are rock solid, could handle their inheritance well, but when it comes to Junior, all bets are off. Whether it be age, maturity, lifestyle choices. There may be some children that frankly should never be able to get their hands on the corpus of that money because they, in your parenting process, need to be guaranteed an income stream rather than getting a hold of that money. And as I said, spending it 12 to 18 months. So again, we're talking about biblical worldview and stewardship as we look at some of these things. And by the way, 12 to 18 months, they've got a name for that. It's called the sudden wealth syndrome. You may have read about it with some of these basketball players, football players, baseball, who get a big contract and then it's gone. It's called sudden wealth syndrome. And it really doesn't matter how much it is. It could be $10,000, it could be $100,000, it could be $1 million. They feel rich. And all of a sudden, it gets spent. Something to think about as a wise steward. Your children are grown and on their own, giving you the freedom to consider including the Lord's work in your estate planning. You'd like to know how some good ways to do that. We can help you walk through some of those scenarios. Here's one that probably applies to somebody out there. You're in a blended family and you might need some help thinking through those distributions. Now, in a blended family, you know, they had an old movie. His, mine, and ours. He had children. She had children. They had children. Now all of a sudden they got 3 levels of children. Now, while those children are minors, there's really no question. We got to take care of the minor kids. Understand? When those children become adults, that's when there can be some issues that you need to be thinking about. I could tell you stories I'm not going to right now in consideration of time, but it is an issue sometimes in blended families. We may be able to help you more, please. You're playing a significant role in providing the raising of your grandchildren, and you need to think through the financial and legal considerations of this situation, like a grandchildren's trust. Run into a lot of folks today who are really providing a lot of care to those grandchildren, and even want to make some provisions in their estate plan, because again, you don't know when you're actually going to be singing "I'll Fly Away." It could happen tomorrow. It could happen later today. It could happen to me on my way back to Baltimore. So those are some situations that you need. You might have a situation where you need a special needs trust. You may have a child that has special needs and needs some consideration. And I was, by the way, I was down in Nashville a few years ago doing a seminar with a group of seniors at Brentwood Baptist, if you know where that is, down south of Nashville. At the end of the section, we had a little question and answer time. An elderly gentleman stood up and he said this: "My wife has Alzheimer's. I'm her only caregiver. What happens to her if something happens to me?" Now, until that issue got addressed, there wasn't anything else that was going to happen. He knew what the question was. We can help you walk through some of those situations. And then perhaps all you need is the certainty of a second opinion on your estate plan, which we'd be happy to provide to you as well. So what I'm asking you to do is to fill out the top of that card, actually fill out that card, circle a time on there that we could call you, give us your phone number, and one of our ladies from our scheduling team will give you a call, set up an initial meeting for you with one of our estate specialists. This will be a private conversation. Nobody in this church is going to know anything about your personal situations. All your financial information and personal information will be kept completely confidential. And we'll not try to sell you any financial products. We're not going to try to manage your money. This is simply a gift. In some instances, I would be saying from your church. In this case, it's a gift from the Kentucky Baptist Foundation to you as our offer of assistance. We also have a national network of referral attorneys that have deeply discounted their rates. We've got about 4 of those guys here in Kentucky. So what you can expect in this estate design is a foundational plan that should last you for years to come, will help you extend your legacy to future generations, and assure you that your Christian testimony will be distributed through your estate plan. Now, I'm going to stay up here after the service is over. If any